Hello, Amanda Lynn here. I just want to make sure that this video is pulling up okay real quick. Many of you have probably seen me do similar videos on this topic and other related topics, but I wanted to come and give a very brief overview on this as far as how nutrients and nutrient deficiencies in particular contribute to addictions and other mental and emotional disorders and diseases. There we go. So again, my name is Amanda. I am a natural health practitioner and nutritionist and working towards my doctorate and PhD in naturoorthopathics, which is the removal of disease through nutrition. And I have a concentration in addictions and mental emotional diseases and disorders. And I say that very humbly and gratefully. I'm very humbled and grateful to be able to share this information that I've been blessed to come to know. And my prayer in sharing this with you is to bring you hope and encouragement without judgment upon yourself or anyone else. So if you have been struggling with any type of food addiction, drug addiction, depression, anxiety, anything else that we associate with mental and or emotional conditions, I do pray this brings you some encouragement. Okay, so nutrients and deficiencies are vastly overlooked and underestimated when it comes to understanding and treating these conditions. So you may have seen this chart before in one of my prior videos. So in this column, we have specific amino acids that are the building blocks that transform into particular neurotransmitters or brain chemicals. Okay, these are the substances that are addictive for people who are lacking these specific amino acids and brain chemicals. Okay, so there are ones specific for heroin, for cocaine, for alcohol, for Valium, for sweets, starches, chocolate, tobacco. Okay, and as you see in this column here, there are, let me go back to that. There are symptoms associated with these deficiencies. So a lot of times when people have an addiction, they might also have what we call a co-occurring condition. So people with addictions might also have depression. People with anxiety might also have depression. People with ADHD might also have OCD. Okay, so these things can manifest as co-occurring many times. So here are some of these symptoms. Crave for comfort and pleasure, desire certain food or drugs, depression, low energy, lack of concentration, attention deficit, low self-esteem, obsessive compulsive behaviors, irritability, rage, sleep problems, cravings, heat intolerance, fibromyalgia, again, anxiety, nervous, tense, mood swings. Okay, so and these are just a list of some of the things that we might experience. The building blocks of proteins. Okay, so when we break down proteins that we consume, it breaks down into amino acids. And those amino acids are used to manufacture neurotransmitters. Okay. Amino acids are needed in the brain to build neurons, connective tissue, tissue, and neurotransmitters. Most neurotransmitters are made from amino acids metabolized from dietary protein. Okay, so just a recap of what I just said. All right, billions of neurotransmitters keep our brain functioning, managing everything from breathing to heartbeat, learning, and concentration levels. They affect psychological functions such as fear, mood, pleasure, and joy. Okay. The brain needs neurotransmitters to regulate many necessary functions, many autonomic functions that we don't think about. Our body just naturally does, like our heart rate, breathing, sleep cycles, digestion, mood, concentration, appetite, and muscle movement. Okay. So again, things like heart rate and breathing. So this is the reason why when someone is lacking a certain amount or particular kind of neurotransmitter in their brain, okay, this is the thing that leads to addiction. And because these things become to regulate heart rate, breathing, things like that, that is why people who have a true addiction, that becomes their necessity for life. It's way above basic essentials like food, water, shelter. Okay, because their body wants to keep living, and their body has learned that in order to regulate heart rate and breathing and things such as that, they need these particular substances. Okay, so that goes for drugs and food and different things like that. Okay, so it is not just a matter of willpower and love, like many people think. Bodies become very dependent on having these substances to regulate. Okay, so what helps to digest and assimilate these amino acids that help formulate our neurotransmitters? Okay, because it's not, people might think, well, I eat plenty of protein. Okay, but it's a matter also of what your body is able to break down and utilize, and many factors can influence that. Okay, so for example, vitamin B is necessary to perform the metabolic reactions to metabolize proteins. Okay, vitamin B is necessary to break down those proteins into amino acids. So if you have a vitamin B deficiency, your body is not going to be as able to break down those proteins into amino acids to get converted to neurotransmitters. Hope you're following me there. Okay. And there's a difference between not just B vitamins, but all vitamins. There's a difference between synthetic and natural vitamins. Our body is not nearly as able to utilize synthetic or fake versions of vitamins. Okay. Our body is much more able to utilize natural sources of vitamins. Okay. And of course, our diet, our body is designed to break down vegetables and nuts and seeds and fruits, right? So these natural forms of food are very rich in amino acids, and these amino acids are intact and can be better used by our body. Okay, enzymes are another thing that influence how well we digest and assimilate or utilize nutrients. So without going into too much detail on that, there are digestive enzymes, of course, that break down our food. There's food enzymes, which are actually in food. And then there's metabolic enzymes that carry out other processes. Okay. So people might, and I had an experience with this as well, where I was deficient in the enzymes that are necessary to break down protein. Okay. If you have a deficiency such as that, you are not as able to break those down, get those amino acids and neurotransmitters. Okay. Also, our gut biome. All right. We don't like to think about that in too much detail, but we have a whole ecosystem in our gut. And we have good bacteria and bad bacteria. The good bacteria are the things that actually help break down the foods that we eat and help support the natural processes that our body requires. Okay. These things can become hindered by a variety of factors, and we'll take a look at some of those. So I just want to give you a couple lowdowns on probiotics. They produce certain neurotransmitters in the gut or impact the body's ability to produce neurotransmitters, including GABA, serotonin, and dopamine. Scientists have found that gut bacteria produce neurotransmitters again, serotonin, dopamine, and GABA. They play a key role. Many antidepressants increase levels of these compounds. Specific probiotic strains have been researched for their effects in stress, anxiety, and low mood. Okay, so there's research, there's scientific data on these things, and I'm not sure why this isn't being shared, this isn't being taught, and that's what I hope to change. That's what I hope to change. And going back onto the medications, I won't go too far into that. And medications are necessary sometimes. Antibiotics are necessary. Many of us would not be here if it wasn't for antibiotics. Along the way, we've had different types of infections, ear infections, strep throat, different things like that. And we needed antibiotics to help our body fight that off. The trouble with antibiotics is that it interferes with our gut, with our ecosystem. Many of us don't know that we need probiotics to counteract that. And furthermore, we don't know which probiotics we need to counteract the antibiotics. So a lot of different things involved. Medication sometimes target specific neurotransmitters. Okay, they give a fake or synthetic version of those neurotransmitters to elevate or inhibit certain things. Our body likes to be in balance. Okay, so sometimes when we have a very big increase in certain neurotransmitters, that has the potential to cause some issues as well, especially in children, teens, and young adults. Okay, so let's move on to the gut-brain axis. We all know that there's a connection between our gut and our brain. Okay, so anyone who has looked at something absolutely disgusting, just looking at it can cause that vomit reflex from your gut, right? Or thinking on something that makes you very nervous or uncomfortable, you can feel that butterfly sensation in your stomach. So just with those things as an example, we know there's a connection between the gut and the brain. Okay. But here's the thing, nearly every substance that helps run and control the brain has turned up in the gut. Major neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, glutamate, norepinephrine, and nitrous oxide are there. 24 small brain proteins called neuropeptides are in the gut, as are major cells of the immune system. Enkephalins, one class of the body's natural opiates, are in the gut. And in a finding that stumps researchers, the gut is a rich source of benzodiazepines. Okay, so I'm sure you can deduce your own hypothesis or conclusion from this, that if your body's deficient in these probiotics, these gut things that we need in our gut ecosystem, like the natural opiates and the natural benzodiazepines, you are more likely to want to get that from an external source. Okay, and I'll just leave it at that for now. All right, so the vagus nerve is responsible for the regulation of internal organ functions such as digestion, heart rate, and respiratory rate, as at rate, as well as vasomotor activity and certain reflex actions, such as coughing, sneezing, swallowing, and vomiting. Okay, so the vagus nerve is what connects our first brain to our second brain. Okay, so our first brain being the one we typically think of as our brain in our head, the second brain being in our gut. Sometimes scientists would argue that our gut is our first brain, and what we think of as our brain is our second brain. Okay. Until relatively recently, people thought that the gut's muscles and sensory nerves were wired directly to the brain, and that the brain controlled the gut through two pathways that increased or decreased rates of activity. The gut was simply a tube with simple reflexes. Trouble is, no one bothered to count the nerve fibers in the gut. When they did, they were surprised to find that the gut contains 100 million neurons, more than the spinal cord has. Yet the vagus nerve, basically what this is saying is that the gut influences the brain just as much, if not more so, than the brain influences the gut. Okay. So what goes on in your gut and your body's ability to break down and take in nutrients and manufacture different things your body needs from those, it's it's vastly important what your gut does for the function of your brain. Okay, so it should be no surprise to most of you. During periods of chronic high stress, the body stays in high gear with stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol coursing through the body. Cortisol is a hormone as well. This creates wear and tear on the body and the mind, and over time can create a multitude of health problems such as chronic pain, anxiety, mood swings, gut inflammation, and more. So stress also impacts our body's ability to digest and assimilate nutrients. Okay, so infancy and adolescence are the two times in our life that our brain is growing most rapidly. So medications, stress, nutrients or lack thereof, all these things play a major role in the development of our neuropathways, okay, and the development in the body's regulation of neurotransmitters and brain chemicals. Okay, so there's all kinds of different things that can influence the development of our brain during infancy and adolescence. Okay, so these things that influence the development of our brain and our neuropathways will also influence our perception of things that happen. Okay, so if we have different factors that are influencing our brain development, okay, that are, causing certain neurotransmitters to be too high or too low, that is going to affect how we process and respond to things that happen around us, okay, to stressful events or different things that happen, okay. So so I'm going to just use this this photo for sake of comparison. So a small boy who is lacking nutrients, or who has had multiple rounds of antibiotics, who doesn't have a healthy gut flora, who has had stressful events in his life that his brain was not in a healthy state to deal with and process these things, may lack certain cognitive functions, therefore emotional functions. All kinds of different things might happen to lead this person to a state of depression, of obsessive compulsive behaviors, addictive substances, foods, drugs, different things like that. I've heard stories of comparisons, even between siblings. Well, both of these brothers were raised in the same house by the same parents, and one of these brothers has all these issues, and the other brother is, he's doing great, and he's the CEO of this or that or whatever, and comparing without understanding the underlying things and the underlying causes that can attribute to that. So and there's all kinds of different things, there's birth order and all kinds of different things that can play into that. Obviously what I'm focusing on here is nutrients. Okay, so there might be one brother who had to take antibiotics quite often, and that greatly impacted the way his brain developed and the neurotransmitters, his gut, his overall physical health. Okay, and maybe the other brother wasn't sick as much, didn't have certain antibiotics, or his gut was in a state where his gut flora was able to restabilize. There's all kinds of things that go on biologically that we don't understand. Okay, so if you're a person struggling with any of these things, don't ever compare yourself to someone else. And if you know someone struggling with these things, we can never compare one person to another. It doesn't matter if they're twins. Okay, we all have different things that go on in our body, and our bodies respond in their own individual, unique way. Okay. So how do we help to get this balance back? For these neurotransmitters to be flourishing and healthy and stable. Okay, and how do we enhance what our second brain what our second brain is capable of doing to aid our first brain? Okay, so there's many different things we can do. There's of course the nutrients that we intake. Sometimes there's supplementation that helps. For instance, for your vagus nerve, okay, this is just one exercise that can help with the nerve that goes from your brain to your stomach and from your stomach to your brain. So simply breathing, belly breathing, lying on your back and inhaling till your stomach expands and blowing that back out very slowly. Okay, these are scientifically proven things. This lowers your heart rate and your blood pressure. Okay, it helps to relax that vagus nerve and to get rid of that fight or flight response that our body has. Oxygen is the most vital nutrient to us. That's what we need the most. And some of us are so unaware of our short breaths and panting type breathing, we don't realize that our body is actually very depleted of oxygen. Okay, and that's another way that disease starts to form, is when our body is not getting enough oxygen supply. Okay. Other things, of course, talking, counseling, prayer, meditation, eating live, healthy foods, laughter, sunlight, exercise, all of those things are wonderful. All of those things really help to boost brain chemicals as well. However, when we are not giving our body the biological nutrients that it needs, those things are very limited. Okay, so one thing that I really want to help educate people on and to draw attention to is that nutrients, or lack thereof, play a vital, crucial role in overcoming addictions, depressions, and other mental and emotional diseases and disorders. And this is vastly overlooked and underestimated. Okay, this is very important. For sake of this brief synopsis and introduction, I'm not going to go into all the details about what can help with these nutrients. Just know that there are ways to do that. And one thing I can recommend is to increase your intake of live foods. Okay, that means raw fruits and vegetables, things that still have energy in them. Okay, and these suggestions that I make to people, sometimes they can be collaborative or broad, and sometimes people need very specific attention for specific things and deficiencies that they may be unaware that they have. So hopefully this helps you to better understand, that this is not just a matter of choice. Even when it comes to emotional dysregulation, things like anger, like negativity, different things like that are, there's a biological reason for that. And most times it can be healed over time through treating deficiencies. So I hope that this brings comfort to you in knowing this, and reminds you that our bodies, our brains have all had their each individual experience, and no one's experience has been the same as ours. So there's no room to judge others or ourselves. Okay. But I do want to help people understand how to heal. So if this information has helped you in any way, please feel free to share it with anyone you think it may benefit. So that is all for this video. I'll have another one coming up, and if you're not already watching this on my website at HolisticFit.com, I will have this video there for you. Okay. Loves and hugs. See you soon. Bye-bye.